Hi, welcome to another one of PNDC's Digital Digest. It's an opportunity for members to hear about issues impacting them across the Pacific Northwest, and it's brought to you by the Pacific Northwest Defense Coalition. We're a trade association of security and defense companies across the Pacific Northwest. Today, we're lucky to have Xiao Chen Dennis from K&L Gates, one of PNDC's member law firms, and she's here to talk to us about tariffs. So this is an issue that's impacting a lot of our members, and we want to get a little bit more information about what's really happening, what can we do if it's impacting our business, and debunk some of the myths out there. So first, will you tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you do for the firm?
Yeah, my name is Xiao Chen Dennis, and I'm a partner at K&L Gates, and we are a global law firm with 1,800 lawyers and in 5 different continents, like the U.S., Asia, Australia, Europe, Latin America. We can assist companies with cross-border issue, corporate issue, government contracting, commercial contract. I personally practice international law and corporate law, commercial contracts. And, in general, how do I sum it up? What I do is I help companies buy and sell products and services and expand their operation overseas. Another role that I have is I'm currently the chair of the Oregon District Export Council, which is a group of international business professionals appointed by the U.S. Secretary of Commerce. The DEC is a group of international business professionals who volunteer to assist companies in international business and also to advocate for trade in international business. So definitely your members. Some of our members are custom brokers, lawyers, international security expert, international executives. There are 50 DECs around the country, so 50 DECs for 50 states. So if you're in Washington, there is a very active Washington DEC.
All right. Well, given your background around international business and trade, I've heard about these recent trade wars and tariffs and the steel and aluminum tariffs specifically. So what are those tariffs, and when do they, or did they already go into effect?
Yeah, it definitely went into effect. I mean, it happened in March 8, where President Trump issued a presidential proclamation regarding tariffs for steel and aluminum imports from various countries, and that started the whole thing. And it's what my daughter, come home from her economics class and said to me, "Mom, our washing machine, if you need to buy one, it's going to increase. It's going to cost more," right? So speaking from the baby of the mouth. But on June the 1st in 2018, the U.S. imposed a 25% tariff on imports of steel and 10% tariff on aluminum in the EU, Canada, and Mexico. And June the 15th, President announced that the U.S. will impose a 25% tariff on the $50 billion of Chinese exports. Since then, Chinese have definitely, retaliated, which I'm sure some of your members are experiencing the increase of costs or the, unexpected pricing increase. So it's definitely impacting. Is that true, Collie?
Yeah, that's what we're hearing from some of our members, that there are impacts, and that's part of why we want to have this webinar today, or this digital digest today, to, again, understand what's really happening and what people are reporting out there more anticipatorily. So how important is exporting to Oregon and Washington's economy?
Exports are critical to Oregon's and Washington economies. Most people, don't really know that or aware of it. Oregon is an export-dependent state. I mean, we love to protest, but then we are totally, an export-dependent state. And in general, Oregon export $21.6 billion. That's our export, and 5.6 is going to China. And here's the interesting thing: foreign investment and jobs that are supported by export are about 61,000. And these are numbers that I put up, and that's in 2015, and numbers have definitely gone up. With respect to Washington exports about 77 billion annually and 18 billion to China. And the jobs that are supported, about 332,000 U.S. jobs that are supported by export. Again, I just pulled some of these numbers from U.S. Trade Association or some association out there.
Well, that gives us a lot more context of how this is impacting the Pacific Northwest and the real numbers behind it.
Definitely the day-to-day lives. Like, you may be in jobs that your company might not be the direct exporter, but it's definitely, could be in the supply chain.
Interesting. So are there other tariffs that might affect the aerospace and defense manufacturing industries that we should know about or anticipate?
Well, I think the lists are totally out there already. I mean, you know, President Trump has issued his tariffs, and there are more more to come or whatever. He's looked at it. And from China, because of the trade imbalance, what you're seeing is, you know, our list is going to be longer and their list is shorter. So now they are targeting, you know, other things in addition to just the tariffs.
Interesting. And so like aircraft?
Aircraft, anything to deal with in aerospace defense. I looked up the numbers from U.S.-China Council. We're looking at, you know, 14 billion of impact in aerospace and defense manufacturing products to China. And then I also looked up some numbers for Oregon. You're going to look at, you know, impacting aircraft engines and integrated circuit boards. And, you know, I think that those are the industry that the members are part of.
All right, so it might be impacting your business if it hasn't already, and definitely more to come to learn about that. So if a company does think that this has already started impacting them or they're anticipating that it might, what can they do to insulate or mitigate the damage from suppliers increasing their fees due to tariffs?
I think for current contracts and you're in the middle of it, definitely pull up the dusty contract that you probably have somewhere in the drawers, pull it up and take a review of it to see if there are any provisions that allow you to renegotiate the pricing so that it's evenly shared because there's price increase. And if the contracts are too complicated, seek counsel, a lawyer, to help you through it. For future planning, start looking at alternative suppliers that are from countries that are not impacted by tariffs. Obviously, you can always look for, U.S. Supplier, but it's awfully hard. My understanding is, steel and aluminum are only limited in supply in the U.S. That's the reason why we import. So those are some challenges that you are experiencing. We have seen it with our clients.
Okay. So you have some options out there to mitigate. Legal counsel, it might be a good time to sit down with them, actually read those contracts that you guys have signed, make sure you understand the terms and conditions for both your suppliers and your customers, and see if there's any room in there to negotiate, or definitely before you sign it.
And for future contracts, if you're submitting RFP, instead of just a standard template, make sure that you have provision that will help you renegotiate a price adjustment. I know it's hard enough to find a deal and then finally close the deal, a transaction, and then have to deal with this piece. But, this could really, really increase your cost or decrease your profit, or so the impact is there.
Okay. So what can companies anticipate if they're exporting to, say, China or other countries that are caught up in these tariffs?
Particularly, well, I'll start off with China. China, because of the imbalance, it's tit for tat, right? It's like it's in the playground right now. I slap an tariff on you, and then China reacted, and they, interestingly, if you read any news, the way they did the tariff on the products, it's, certain states and whatever they may be doing, but they're basically running out of the list of products because we import more from China than China export to the U.S. It's always been that way, and it's always been in the news how the imbalance is. So because of the list is running out, what you're seeing, if you're exporting your products to China, is it might be more difficult to clear custom. There might be permitting issue, licensing issue, or if you have companies that are already in operation in China, for example, some of our multinational, and I won't give any names, but basically they're worrying about if you're needing license to operate a business or anything like that, because you're a U.S. company now, it would be potentially much more challenging. They'll make it more red tape for a U.S. company. And then another example that we have heard from our clients that they're also experiencing. If you have a contract with a Chinese customer, depending on what it is and where the policy are going, the Chinese customer is also, breaching the contract. Mostly it's because they're anticipating certain policy coming in, and maybe they're connected to state-owned entities. It's a very different business environment right now, impacted by the tariffs.
And is there any guidance for other countries that might also be impacted by this?
Well, our neighbor in Canada, right? A neighbor in Canada, and then of course Mexico. I know this is a defense membership, but we do ship, a lot of Christmas trees to Mexico, and then we ship, timber to. So it's encompassing the whole entire trade. So it would be interesting to see what's gonna happen in the next few months, and I would recommend keeping very closely, if you're a company involved in all this, to keep yourself close to where things are going.
Okay. So what if one of our member companies is already locked into a firm fixed price contract, and the primes or the government are now assessing, or they're receiving these tariff fees and they're stuck in these contracts? What can they do? Is there any guidance or resources?
I think it is, again, going back to pull out your contract. Each contract is going to be different, and hopefully there are, some provision that allow you some wiggle room to renegotiate, but that's a long shot. But doesn't mean you should not try. I would still recommend, your first option is to pull the contract out and review it yourself first. And then, of course, if it's complicated, and get counsel to help you with it, particularly if it's gonna be a large increase of the pricing or the cost, where you're basically gonna lose money, and to see if there's any way to get out of it or renegotiate. If you are the direct contractor to a government, a prime, again, going back to see if there's any way you can do a change order, even though it's harder for fixed price, but see what you can do within the ramp up the contract. If there any way you can renegotiate, it's gonna be tough. I know it's pushing a rock uphill, but
keep pushing, I guess.
Yeah,
Roll those
yes.
sleeves and start pushing. So what can a company do? So we're looking at kind of the other way. If their suppliers are now passing through these tariff charges, once components have already shipped, and it's not the same as when it was originally quoted, what can they do?
Well, it depends if you're David or Goliath, right?
Okay.
Or whether you really need that component part, or whether there is an alternative to that component part, and how restrictive it is. The other thing that you have to look into it, how restrictive your contract is, because of course, if the pricing changed, then there might be wiggle room that you could find alternative supplier. But if you're on a timeline, you really don't have a lot of negotiation power. And maybe going back, if you have good relationship with your supplier, it's maybe you split the, the cost, the pricing. I certainly would encourage, working it through a business solution before you do the legal solution. And I hate to sound like repeating myself, but going back and look at your agreement again, and also definitely your purchase order, because sometimes in your purchase order that most layperson don't pay attention to those tiny prints. Do look at them and see whether that you have agreed to amending your contract through purchase order, which means that you may have agreed to it because they sent it through purchase order.
And is there any difference if your end customer is actually the government? Is there any negotiation room? Should they try to go to the government and see if they can negotiate anything?
I think you should always try. I mean, I hate to say don't try. You should always try, depending on your relationship and what your products and how badly they need your product. Because there's always a way to amend the agreement. In fact, what we're also seeing, the prime contractor is coming to some of the clients who are subcontractors because the government is actually asking the prime to increase the standard or the quality, particularly in the defense industry. They feel like they may want a more secure product now than they have negotiated before. And this is just an example. In that situation, you as a sub, you have all the flow through terms that are impacting you, but then it's not clear who should bear the cost, right? The prime is always going to push it down to the sub, and the sub to the on down, and it's having the communication and working through it, and sometimes not. I don't know if there are any procurement people, but it should be a team, not just the procurement contracting person, but your business contact or your contact between the government as well.
Okay, perfect. And then what are some of the factors that companies need to pay attention to within this current trade environment?
I think that you need to pay attention to the policy coming out. Right now it's like Buy America. It's big in the US. Other countries have the same policy as well. For China, it's buy Chinese product, and they may have very draconian IP requirement that is certain percentage is Chinese company. And of course we have the same thing here as well with Buy America, and it's hard with an integrated global supply chain, whether we're supplying to the government or we're exporting products to China. So those are important factors. Even though you may not be the direct importer of product or the exporter, but you probably are part of the supply chain. So, this is impacting so many businesses and consumers as well, that paying close attention to what is going on and the changes, both in the US and wherever your large market is located.
Okay. So with all of this knowledge in our heads, and just barely exposing the tip of a huge iceberg, and like you said, there's some other federal regulations out there, like the Buy American Act, and I'm sure there are a lot of other regulations you should be savvy on. Are there resources to help companies learn more about these tariffs or other imposed or proposed tariffs? And what happens if a company needs more assistance than just our digital digest today?
There are resources available, and some of these are paid by us, the taxpayer.
So prepaid.
Prepaid. You might as well take advantage of it. As the tariffs impact, whether it's the cost of good or how the export market might be closed for example, in China, if it becomes increasingly more difficult to export to China, maybe it looks towards other markets like South Korea. We seem to be much more friendlier to South Korea, or another market, or a smaller market that are not in the middle of this trade war. And then if you're looking into this as a strategy, there are U.S. Export Assistance Center that are connected to U.S. Department of Commerce. There are Business Oregon, which is the U.S. Department of Commerce for Oregon, and Washington has the same, Washington Department of Commerce, U.S. Department of Commerce located in Washington. There are agencies out there, and then again, back to the DEC. The DEC often are connected with the U.S. Export Assistance Center, and if you need, some of the, like going into a South Korean market, there might already be someone doing it that could help, or keep an open mind where your products may be able to be exported. And then importing is the same. Maybe they are an alternative, alternative countries that you can import to. I know it's all challenging. I would totally acknowledge that.
All right, perfect. And then you guys are also a resource, right? K&L Gates?
We are a resource. Definitely, we are in 47 cities. So, and then we also, with Team K&L Gates, there are webinar that you can get on that talks about other type of international issue, for example, the privacy, GDPR compliance, and doing business in India, and some of the webinars, you can get on it as well.
So if you had to take us away with a few big tips, these are the things you took back to your bosses. This is what I learned on the PNDC Digital Digest with K&L Gates, what would those big takeaway tips be?
I think, here are the tips that whether you're in Oregon or Washington, and I would say pay attention to the resources, right? That is available out there. If you're trying to export or find a new market, those resources may have grant to help you do a trade show, to look for other markets. But here are some of the tips that I'm going to list. Pay very close attention to our current trade environment. It is not just rhetoric. It's not just news. Just because whatever the regulation is coming out or the proclamation, whether it's US, China, Canada, Mexico, any of the big markets that we export to in this region, can impact your business. Plan for the tariffs and the change of trade regulation. It's awfully challenging to do that, but you probably need to plan for a 219 or 220 cycle. It's not too far to plan that far out. And before you submit your RFP or sign a contract, review the provision very carefully and make sure that there are provisions to allow you to make changes to your pricing. I know it's probably difficult to negotiate those in, but at least go with it with that in mind and just ignoring it altogether, or that you're using just a similar template that, business as usual. It's a little bit of a different kind of business environment now, so business as usual may not be working. Again, reach out to the various international business agency, and I'll provide you the link, so you'll have them. And of course, you can always reach me here at Canada Gates Portland, or PDNC for contact information.
All right, so that's perfect. So again, very tip of the iceberg. Might want to go buy that washing machine now before the price goes up. Just teasing. But again, K&L Gates has a wealth of knowledge and expertise to help you, along with many other PNDC sustaining member law firms, and then a lot of members, right? So you might want to talk to your peers of what are they doing to mitigate some of these risks, what is really happening within their company, and then also watch for our congressional roundtables. Those are a great opportunity to sit down with your representatives and your senators and tell them firsthand what's happening within your business, so what you're really seeing boots on the ground. So this will conclude another one to PNDC's Digital Digest. So thank you again to K&L Gates, and we'll look forward to seeing you again in a month or so. Take care.
Thank you.